This is an interesting subject. It's probably one of those really sort of simple, or sometimes one we just whiz past on a day-to-day sort of goings about. But I think it's got great shapes, great little intricacies and shadow and light and play of light. So let's see how I go. Quite often when you're traveling and looking for something to paint, you always go for the river, the buildings, the bridges. But with this one, we were painting in a small little park and we did have the chance to paint some buildings or the building almost would have been a bit of a backdrop. There was a lovely little church in the background, almost directly behind, but just to the right of where this little subject was. But these almost micro sort of subjects can be really fun, whether it's a fountain. This is a water drinking fountain, or the classic statued fountain. Statues, they all make really great sort of micro subjects that a lot of times you can walk past. But this one just had a lot of character about it, and it was in a nice little setting as well. Probably the tricky part I felt was going to be the amount of green that was in the mid-distance. And also actually the colour of the stand, that grey. It's always hard to make that nice and pretty, colourful, attractive. That's always one of the ultimate sort of things, is can we make the painting ultimately aesthetically pleasing as well? So that is the challenge with this one. And a lot of times that's where I will choose subjects that are naturally warm in colour, so it's more a matter of painting to those colours, and that will drive the colour saturation and the warmth and the brightness. But once again, it can be a trap that if we always go looking for colourful subjects, when we do find something that is a great subject but doesn't have a lot of colour, we can struggle technically. And it looks like I've made a mistake here. That's what you may be thinking, but it's actually not. I've deliberately put down the thicker, darker paint so I could wipe out. One of the great little lessons that I learnt when I did a master copy of one of Richard Schmid's paintings was that he quite often would put in an area early on, and almost before he started even putting down any shapes, just a blush of colour or value, and then leave that as, say, the value of the background. So then he wouldn't need to put a great deal of paint over later over that area. So you get the benefit of it being pretty close to the right value, but also the fact that it is thin paint that's allowing that shape to disappear as well and to sit back, which when we're trying to create the illusion of a three-dimensional effect on a two-dimensional board, that's the key. So it looks like I've got one of the Eclipse brushes here, the combers, which I really do love because we can get quite sharp edges, neat, clean drawing, and great control, but also they're quite good on bigger areas as well for doing the foliage and for spreading paint, even though they are not, they're only, that previous one was only 1/2 inch. This looks like the little size 3 Eclipse, Master's Choice brush. I do have two. The Master's Choice is a little thicker and does have a little more fibre, but it's marvellous for these smaller shapes. And especially that lovely cast shadow, it was just providing a nice bit of design. It'll help slow the eye from wanting to travel from the bottom of the board vertically too quickly as well. But we do need to be careful early on that if the underpainting is wet, we've got to be careful that I don't try to go in too hard too soon. and do too much. That's why timing is of the essence. It truly is. A lot of people think, oh, oil paint, as I have said many a time, people think that we've got all the time in the world, but for us to lay down some paint and allow that to set up and then to be able to go back into it, there is a certain amount of timing. It's almost like very slow drying glue. And technically that's what the medium is doing. A lot of people wonder and ask the question, do I work wet in wet? And I find there's no better way for me to paint anyway. And I think it's one of the great ways. And once you learn that timing, the thicknesses of paint, how much medium, then the world really is your oyster. Because ultimately, I've been getting paid to watch paint dry for quite a few years now, sort of 36, 37 years. But it's that skill and timing to know when to come in. And a different season, different day, from a cool winter's morning to a quite warm, dry summer's day, windy, dry summer's day, it's going to change that evaporation rate. So it's more about a feel than a timing factor. I'm feeling when I'm bringing on this thicker paint, if it feels as though it's a little too wet in wet, or trying to put almost like melted butter on melted butter, if it's not laying on, then I'll know that, you know what, it's not me who's clumsy, awkward, wrong. It's more that just the paint just hasn't set up. There is a way to get the paint on if I absolutely have to, but it's not really recommended, because then we tend to encounter the opportunity of too many mistakes, or because there's only so far that we can get with working really wet in wet when the underpainting. That's why we work thin to a thicker, fatter finish. It's always the key, the goal. And that big light area of the brick wall is a dangerous one if I allow it to be too strong, too powerful, and it can, just through its sheer size and just that weight of that shape, that it might push forward. So that's why going in thin was the key. That's another way to create depth, thinner in the background, thicker paint in around of the foliage, of the grass, of some of the pathway at the base of the fountain as well. So I was just trialling a different little liner brush there. I still feel as if I don't have the full feel of it. That's the thing with brushes. You need to be patient and you need to persevere. Well, that painting went pretty well to plan, pretty well how I expected it to go, but it did require a few little alterations really late in the painting that I think just pulled it together, but also made it a stronger painting. Thanks for watching. All the best. Bye for now.